Hi everyone, I'm Debojit from the group 2. So our industry to analyze was the airline and the travel industry, and we have a case study about Jet Airways. So Jet Airways journey through Indian skies. So let's see a bit about the story of Jet Airways. Jet Airways was founded in 1993 by Naresh Goyal. It was positioned as a full service airline. It was a premium service alternative for Indian airlines. What we can see, the peak of Jet Airways was in the year 2003 to 2004, where it had the maximum market capture, almost around 50%. The strength of Jet Airways during the initial days was number one, it had early market entry, so less competition. Number two, it was trusted among business travelers. Number three, it provided a premium and luxury service airline. It was one of the first private full service airline. Now, if we see the case study of Jet Airways, we really need to understand the entire airline industry's very evolution in India. So the airline industry was mostly a monopoly run by the state from 1953 to 1993. Then there was the open skies policy in 1990. There were a lot of private players that entered the market from 1994 to 2002. That is also the same time where Jet Airways entered. In 2003, we saw a disruption by the low cost carrier airlines, which entered the market. Very recently, we saw the privatization of Air India back to the Tata Group. And recently, we can also see from 2022 to 2025 schemes like Uran, which is trying to get into regional and regional airports and not just focusing on metropolitan cities. It is an incentive program by the government of India.
Yes, let us analyze the RASK and CASK of Jet Airways. The RASK stands for revenue per available seat kilometer, and the CASK stands for cost per available seat kilometer. Here in the graph, if we observe, the RASK and CASK are there is a slight difference, but over the year, the quarter after the quarter 3 and financial year 18, there is a great divergence we can observe, which indicates the greater loss experienced by the Jet Airways. And here we'll compare the RSK of various airlines. Here we can see that the Jet Airways RSK is very higher than the other airlines, but at some point of time it is very less. It doesn't mean that it is making profit, but it still has a higher CASK, which is indicating like here it is high loss experiencing. And here the first graph, we can observe that initially there are more number of flights run by the Jet Airways, but over the year earlier of the 2019, we can observe a sharp decline, which indicates that most of the planes were grounded. And here the second fleet crisis graph is explaining that the initially at February there were a very less number of flights were grounded, but at the end of February there are more number of flights grounded. And here we can observe the falling market share of Jet Airways. uh, Indigo's market share was growing steadily, but the Jet Airways, if we can observe, it is decreasing over the year.
Let's analyze the profit and loss statement of Jet Airways during the same period of time. We can see that the operating profit was negative in certain years. The net profit was also reaching negative, meaning very high losses. In 2019, we can clearly see a very high amount of loss, around over 5,000 crores. Even though the sales were increasing, if we do see the numbers, that was because that they were trying to compete with the low cost airlines. So they were pricing their aircrafts, pricing their tickets lower, but at the cost of loss. Now, the major reasons for the downfall of Jet Airways were the cost revenue mismatch that we were discussing, how it could not compete with the LCC group of airlines. Second, the balance sheet weakness it had. The Air Sahara, which it acquired to present as a low cost airline, was something that it spent a lot in buying to prevent the Kingfisher and the Air Sahara collaboration. Then we can see strategic drift, where they tried to model Jet Airways both as a premium and budget segment, but this hybrid model was not working out. Finally, we can see very high governance gaps where we can see that the founder-centric control idea was not basically working for Jet Airways. So the revival, there were several revival plans. One was the Jalan Kalrock Consortium in 2021, where the government of India asked JKC to pump 350 crore upfront. There was also a point where JKC wanted to retain some of the Jet Airways and rebrand it. JKC JKC also approached NCLT, which is the National Company Law Tribunal, and the NCLAT to push the deadline so that it can generate sufficient funds for it. But eventually, these all revival plans didn't work out. The 350 crore plan, JKC did just pump 200 crore, missing the 150 crore mark. Overall, we can see that it loses the IAT code, and finally, the Supreme Court orders the liquidation of Jet Airways so that all the assets can be sold and the lenders who owe money from Jet Airways can be paid back. Finally, can we have an alternative for Jet Airways? So if we do see, Jet Airways failed to position itself in a market where India was trying to get more people from the middle class to fly. It focused more on the it focused more on rich people. Second, it had a very diverse fleet, which it was difficult to manage. Third, it could not stand through cash crunches and other cyclic losses. There is a very good example of the recent entry of Akasa Air, which can be a very good example to study how Jet Airways could push themselves. Jet Airways could have managed a single fleet, not have a diversified fleet. Second, it could secure more stable investor support, and it could also position, like Akasa directly positioned for an LCC guideline. Jet Airways could also directly go for an LCC route.
So the final key takeaways from this case study is Jet Airways could not compete with low-cost airlines in India's tough market, and heavy debt and poor cost control made the airline weak. Rising fuel prices and currency issues worsened the problems, and success in India needs lower cost, clear strategy, and financial strength. And finally, airlines with strong finances and focus win when mixed model fails. Thank you. And these are the references.